Hello and welcome to the 42 Rugby Weekly. We're without Gavin Casey this week. Unfortunately, he's on some well-earned time off and has probably drunk Kerry dry at this stage. Murray Kinsella here in his place, and I'm joined as always by the Tullow Tornado, Bernard Jackman. How are you, Birch?
Very good, thanks. Yeah, I've never been called that before, but yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it in my current physical state. That's a massive positive and overestimation of my my ability to do anything.
Humble. You sweep the shed still. That was actually producer Brano who came up with that, so
Okay.
give him his credit. We're also joined by my friend and colleague, the County Down Diamond, Garry Doyle. How are you, Gary?
I'm glad you didn't call me the Banbridge Bomber, Murray.
I was actually tiptoeing around and going, what's sensitive here? What would I get away with? The County Down Diamond is nice, I think.
Yeah.
Brano suggested worse. I won't go through his suggested list, but we're delighted to have you here, Gary. I hope all is well with you. Listen, lads, we've loads to get into. We got some serious questions from the members, from people on Twitter. There's loads about the Ireland squad, the United Rugby Championship as well in particular, and that's where we're going to start. First of all, Birch, what have you made of the announcements, the format, what we have ahead of us starting in September?
Look, I think it's brilliant. I think it needed a lift. It needed a complete reorganization, rebranding, and yeah, I think it's better to start from fresh again. And this certainly is doing that. The South Africans being eligible for Europe, that's something that wasn't clear, or certainly wasn't expected for me 6-7 months ago when we heard about them coming in. So I think that's great. I mean, it means every game is going to be important, from not just qualifying for the top 8 and getting into the quarterfinals, but also in terms of trying to get into European Cup competition, whether that's through finishing top of your local pool, or obviously getting in the top 8. So 18 games as well, 3 less games, not clashing with international weekends. I just think the product is going to be a hell of a lot better, and it should make it more competitive. I think a big reason the Irish teams dominated it was strength and depth, and obviously we know the talent pool in Ireland is quite strong. Players generally stay here. The squads have good enough budget to carry a lot of those kind of development type players, and hence we were stronger in international periods than the Scots and the Welsh and the Italians, but that won't be needed as much. And yeah, I'm excited by it. And then in fact it's going to be 90% free to air as well, with the 4 South African teams coming in who are hopefully playing an exciting brand of rugby, or at least a different type of rugby, whether it's based on that power game. There's some big name World Cup winners going to be playing for them. So yeah, I can't see any negatives to it really. The only question mark is around the qualification for the European Cup, and obviously 4 teams already being qualified by nature of winning their local pool. And I saw Mick Dawson, the Leinster CEO, come out yesterday and said that they voted against that, or the Irish voted against that. And in 2 years' time, it's back up for decision, and it has to be unanimous next time. So I would say in 3 years' time, that will be gone, and it'll be the top 8, regardless of your pool. And I think that's the best way, but I can understand for the Welsh and the Scots in particular, and Italians, why they would want to try and make sure they have at least one team in the Champions Cup. But realistically, I see that as like a subsidy, and the sooner it's gone, the better, and we just have the best 8 teams, because I think that competition will drive this tournament to be better than ever. And by having something like that in there, it can in some way diminish the ruthlessness of pro sport and final seeding. So yeah, in general, I'm really happy with it.
Some people aren't happy. We got one, I suppose, message from a member in the WhatsApp group, the 42 WhatsApp group. It's OB1. He says, the URC sounds like the most Americanized franchise I've ever heard being allowed into rugby. Are we going to lose what rugby's about? And are we becoming the boring, statistics-driven, stop-start crap that is the NFL? So some people aren't convinced, Gary. What about from your point of view as a journalist? You're writing about this. You've been writing about the Pro 14. You've been critical, I think, with justification at times. What's your sense of the new era?
Yeah, I think, Murray, there's a couple of factors. Firstly, the Pro 12, Pro 14, initially the Celtic League, then the Rabo Direct, then the Magners League. It was called the Pro 14 when it had only 12 teams in it this year. Then it was the Rainbow Cup. Now it's the URC. I can see where our member is coming from in terms of all the name changes has affected the identity of this competition without any doubt. Like, in addition to that, it's competing its nearest neighbours. The top 14 has been in operation since 1892. The Gallagher Premiership has been going since 1987. They are national leagues. It's a big thing for a team to win its national title. Like in France, in many respects, it's a lot of clubs view it as a bigger deal than winning the Champions Cup. The opposite is here, whereby the Champions Cup came first before the Celtic League was formed. And basically, as we all know, Murray, it's very hard to create tradition. It just doesn't happen, Now, it did happen with the Heineken Cup, but it took about 5 years before it caught on in Ireland. So that was a big thing. And it really only caught on in Ireland because Irish teams started to become successful. This tournament, I have an affection for it, despite being critical of it. And I feel it has an opportunity to do well now for two reasons. One, free to air on TV gives it the potential to grow, to find a new audience. Secondly, it's got an injection of quality. You've got 4 really good teams coming into it. And the problem with this year's Pro 14 was the fact that the Welsh and the Scots down tools, the Italians were terrible. Funnily enough, when it came to the Rainbow Cup, Treviso got on a bit of a run. And now, obviously, they benefited from the fact that they played Zebra twice and they got a walkover as well. But it just shows that if a team does get on a bit of a run, that their performances can improve, their consistency can improve, their motivation improves. So I'd actually disagree with Bernard on the idea of the Italian Scots having one team that will enter into the Champions Cup, and also the fact that the Welsh will be guaranteed to get a team in, on the basis that one of the main criticisms of the Pro 14 over the years has been the fact that it hasn't had any relegation. Therefore, you don't have teams with something to play for. If now you do, every country will have an opportunity to get into the Champions Cup, which will not only bring prestige, but also decent prize money. So it should give them the motivation. It should decrease the number of dead rubbers. We hope. I don't know. It may increase the number of dead rubbers. Now, the obvious downside to that is that the teams, there is a potential that teams could finish 7th and 8th in the Pro 14 and not qualify for Europe. But really, if you're finishing 7th and you're not getting into the Champions Cup, you can't expect too much sympathy. You're finished 7th. You haven't. If you're not, excuse me, if you're not part of an elite 6, then tough love, you're out.
Yeah,
and you get the chance to go. You shouldn't be rewarded just for finishing 7th.
Yeah, and there are some quirks to this. As Stephen Ball on Twitter pointed out to us, you can actually win the URC and not qualify for the Champions Cup. We clarified that you can finish, say, 8th in the table. You can go through the playoffs and win, but you might have not finished in your regional pool, at the top of your regional pool to qualify into Europe, which is a strange thing, because the other places after the regional 4 are decided on the main league table rather than the playoffs. It's a real quirk there. So it'll be fascinating to see how the format pans out, Birch. But as you say, the TV angle, it's huge. Barry O'Sullivan was on to us on Twitter. He said 52 of the 60 games are free to air on TV, which is great. And he was asking about the 8 games that are not being shown. As far as we understand, they're Ulster games. But we also now have this URC TV subscription streaming service, Birch. It feels kind of very modern.
Yeah, no, it does. And I think Premier Sports will also have every game as well. That's my understanding of it. So effectively, for the people who want to, make sure they have access to every game, they can keep the prescription with Premier Sports. For the people who don't want to pay for it, they'll have a huge amount of it available on free to air. Plus, obviously, this streaming service they're talking about, and hopefully there'll be a highlight show or two as well, a weekly highlight show where everybody can catch up with the best action from across. Because I think it has been, the issue with it has been, as fans, we've become very focused on our own country, and we don't really understand the quality or the exciting players coming from Wales, Italy, etc. So the more of this, the better for me. And I understand. Look, they have had name changes and it has changed format a lot, and I don't disagree, Gary, but I think at least put your hand up and say, look, it hasn't worked. We need a fresh start. And the URC may seem very Americanized and kind of branded as such. And I'm just thinking back to the kind of furore in Bristol when they became the Bristol Bears, and everyone saying oh, this is a joke, and et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is Bristol fans and Bristol rugby people are now attracted to what they see on the pitch, and the Bears have caught on. And I think if you were an older fan who was wanted to keep Bristol Rugby Club name as part of the heritage, etc. If you love rugby, you'll still be enthused by what you see on the field, the players that are representing your club, and you'll move along with it. And for every person who is so staunch to don't want to go with it, we'll hopefully pick up a few who are open to it. So I think this competition will live or die by the product. It'll live or die by competitive games, fighting tooth and nail for qualification, whether that's for Europe through your own pool or to make the top 8. And we have to hope. I certainly believe the 4 South African teams will add to this, because let's no disrespect to the Cheetahs or the Kings, they didn't have the financial resources or probably the history that the Bulls, the Stormers, etc. have. Plus, as I said, I think our internationals will play a lot more, and likewise the Welsh and the Scots and the Italians will. So I think the quality will go up 30%, and that will decide whether this competition gets the buy-in across the participating countries that it hasn't really got in the past, or it had and lost and came back again, depending on where you were from. So, I think it's a hugely exciting step forward. And yeah, we've had to wait a long time to hopefully get the right mix, but I think we might have it now.
And I think there will be more interest in what's going on outside your own borders, especially because you can use either Premier Sports or the URFC, the TV subscription platform, to watch every single game if you want to, and even on demand, because it's hard to fit everything in a weekend, but you could catch up on the South Africans on a Monday. It'll be great to have access to that. And having said that, we're going to look outward, but we've got loads of questions on the Irish angle, Gary, so let's go a bit parochial on this. Brian Hughes is on to us, and he said, with a condensed regular season to 18 matches, along with tougher matches against the SA teams, how big an impact will this have on the ability of the provinces to utilise the 50+ squads and therefore blood new talent as previous seasons? What do you reckon on that one?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I actually don't think it'll have. I don't think it'll have that big an impact, Murray, because when you look at the calendar for next season, you've got 7 of the Irish squad are going to be in South Africa with the Lions. Then you have the November series where Argentina and New Zealand are coming. You've got the Six Nations penciled into the calendar. And then at the end of the season, you've got a 3-test tour to New Zealand. Now, in addition to that, you've got this much improved domestic competition. Plus, you've also got your Champions Cup. So the intensity will be there all the way through the season. And when you look at the stats this season in terms of the number of games that Johnny Sexton played for Leinster, Tadhg Furlong and James Ryan, Ryan played 11 times, Sexton and Furlong played 6 each. So that hasn't decreased the opportunity for other players to come through and progress. Like, it might surprise you to know that Fineen Wycherley, he's only 23, he's already played 62 times for Munster. And there is a facility for players to come through and develop, providing, of course, that the coaches at the head of each province is prepared to do that. And quite frankly, all 4 head coaches are more than happy to give young players their opportunity. So I don't see it being that big an issue. What I would like to see is players being released more to clubs to play in the AIL if they're going to be redundant. I don't want to see them stuck in a gym during November and during the Six Nations. You don't want young players to be idle. I do think there needs to be the pyramid is fine at the top, but there's a bit of a gap between, to say the least, between the provinces and the clubs. I'd like to see more love given to the clubs and more players given to them as well, and making sure that they're not redundant during the periods when the internationals are away. And other factors that come to mind, I'm stretching it out a bit here, but when you look at the national team, Murray, and you look at the fact that Joe Schmidt's last game in charge, the team that he picked that day against New Zealand, Carney, Earls, Ringrose, Henshaw, Stockdale, Sexton, Murray, Healy, Best, Furlong, Henderson, Ryan, O'Mahony, Van der Fleer and Stander, transfer that to the game against England, Andy Farrell's last game, and basically it was pretty much the same team with the exception of Keenan coming in for Carney and Herring coming in for Best. The other players that broke into the side were on the bench in the World Cup in 2019. So there hasn't, on the face of it, there hasn't been a lot of change. But to contradict that point, Andy Farrell capped 11 debutants in 2020, and he's got another 12 on-cap players in the squad coming up for the upcoming tests. He wouldn't have been able to bring those number of players through unless they were proving their worth at provincial level. So they have been given the opportunity. It's kind of slipped under the radar a little bit, but I've no doubt that they will continue to get their opportunity next year, because it's the policy from the RFU, and that has floated downwards to the 4 provinces. So I don't see that being an issue next year, actually.
Yeah, interesting point you make about how busy a calendar it's going to be. And then Farrell himself actually referenced that just after he named the squad, how big a year it is going to be for Irish rugby. The AIL kind of angle is really interesting as well. And we got an anonymous email actually on this. The person didn't want to be named, but they said, given the new format of the URC avoiding scheduling games during international windows, do you think this could give non-international players the opportunity to get regular interrupted game time at club/AIL level? Birch, we've been on the soapbox about this for a while, but it does feel like a real opportunity in that sense.
Yeah, I think this will affect the ability to give certain squad players or young players regular game time in the domestic league. I think that if you look at the reason that Munster and Leinster in particular are able to go so deep is because they're quite comfortable in the they were quite comfortable in the regular season. So you could rest players without a massive risk of losing. If the quality of opposition goes up, coaches will be very focused on getting wins and that opportunity to blood players. I'm not saying, for example, I think the Irish provinces will go full strength against the other Irish provinces, okay? Because that's key, and now winning, being the best team in your local group is a guaranteed way of getting in, and then they'll suss it out in terms of how the opposition are stacking up. So if, for example, the Welsh and the other teams are suddenly that bit better and stronger, well, that'll drive selection policy. So if the competition steps up a bit and teams can beat each other more regularly, then I think that some of those younger players will get squeezed, and they may play against a Zebra or Dragons or whatever, a team who maybe underperforming a little bit or a little bit weaker, but they won't get that run of games that they have been able to get. And that stat about Finian Wycherley, it's brilliant that he's got so many games. But I do think it's crucial that they find opportunities to play if they're not getting games for the province. And some players are slower burners than others. So, for example, the Brian O'Driscoll and James Ryan, they never played for the province. They already got capped for Ireland. They went straight from club into playing for the country. But they're rare. But there are guys who you can see straight away. I mean, a Ryan Baird or Rowan Kelleher, you can see them at 18, 19 and go, yeah, they have massive potential, and they'll be fast tracked. But there's other players who are slower burners, and they need to have opportunities. So I do think also with the reduced budgets, with the effect of COVID, I think with the international travel, I think the viability of a a proper calendar is very much affected. So I don't see them going over to play, the Scarlets A team, etc. And obviously they can play, the other provincial sides. But I would love to see some of those young players and experienced players who are struggling for form or injury going back into a boosted club season and really give that a chance to be, a further part of the pathway for a future international. So I think, look, it's not going to be completely drastic. You're not going to have, fully professional teams playing in the AIL by nature of contracted players being sent back. But I think come November, December, I do see more of them going back, and then it's a case for the clubs to provide, a really good environment, really good exchange of feedback back to the coaches, really good awareness of load, etc. So it's not affecting or increasing the chance of injury. And I think once both parties, communicate well and play by the rules, I think that league can quickly come back into being a part of it again. And whether it's driven by URC or whether it's driven by COVID, I don't care. I just want to see a better balance to how we manage the domestic and professional game.
Yeah, you're both speaking pure sense on the AIL there. And we need the provinces to really embrace it and drive it themselves. Just on the provinces, Birch, would you have concerns about the Irish provinces being in the Champions Cup now, given this format?
Yeah, I do. I think it'll... I think we could only have two in it, to be honest. That's we're taking it as given the four South Africans are going to be strong. I'll be honest, I've watched a good bit of them in this Rainbow Cup, and I thought they've been very slow to get going, but that's understandable. They're a year behind us in terms of game time, etc. But when you look at the quality of player that they have available to them, I think they will be strong. So that's that's going to make it more competitive for our team. So, realistically, I'd love all four to be in, and but it's highly unlikely, I think. So, I think it's going to make it tougher. And I'd imagine, if we could get 3 and 1, that'd be success for me. But again, I'm presuming that everybody's going to up their game. And, the likes of Glasgow and Edinburgh as well are going to bounce back from, what's been probably poor seasons for them when they look like they're making progress. Treviso are going to, use this Rainbow Cup final or Rainbow Cup final as a way of getting back to where they were at. I mean, if you have Treviso, Treviso, Glasgow, Edinburgh back, being able to take points off other teams, and then the four South African teams, it's going to make it so much more difficult.
That's where, Gary, the derbies in Ireland are certainly going to heat up. And we had a question from Koppel. He was saying, are the geographical based groups a good thing overall? I mean, they're going to be ferocious games.
I think they are, Murray. Although I'm the sort of person that would like to see an opportunity given for, say, a de facto Georgian national team to be allowed entry into the Champions Cup. I think it's just really important that for rugby that there is a geographic spread to the Champions Cup, and that Scots, Welsh, Irish, Italians are guaranteed at least one place. That's massive. And even from the competitive end of things, if you have Welsh clubs that are struggling to make the quarterfinals, but to still have an opportunity to finish top of their regional group, then they won't down tools. They'll continue to perform towards the end of the season. I think it's an experiment worth trying. If it flops after 2 years and it shows that there are more dead rubbers, or that there is just complete unfairness towards the teams that finish 7th and 8th and don't make the Champions Cup, then the opportunity to revise the rule. But at this stage, I actually think it's a reasonable experiment to try, considering some of the experiments that we saw in the Rainbow Cup this year, which were just flopped. I think you have to try things, and actually hats off to the people that have come up with this format. I think it's pretty good. I'm really looking forward to the quarterfinals in a year's time. It's there's nothing better than knockout rugby. The one other point that I think we need to address as well, Murray, is the fact that there's a strong possibility of a Club World Cup coming out of this. There was a piece in the Daily Telegraph on Tuesday, I think it was, and Simon Halliday, who is the chairman of European Club Rugby, he was saying that there's now an opportunity, because the South Africans are no longer in limbo after moving out of Super Rugby, that there's a really strong opportunity of a Club World Cup taking place in 2024. And basically how that would work would be the 8 quarterfinalists from the 2023-24 Champions Cup season would then face the top 8 teams from the Southern Hemisphere in a straight knockout tournament in 2024. And that would happen every 4 years, which would basically lead to that year's Champions Cup being superseded by the Club World Cup. Now, that could be a fascinating addition to the rugby calendar. Now, it could also hurt every Irish province if they don't qualify for the Club World Cup. But I mean, can you imagine the idea of Leinster getting a home draw against the Crusaders in a semi-final?
Yeah,
that would be
huge interest in it. Absolutely.
Just Murray. Last thing on the 4 groups in the URC. Mm-hmm. I don't agree with Gary that we need to have a mix, because let's be honest, it actually has ramifications for the Champions Cup as well. So just for example, let's take the South Africans. Say they're not competitive, okay? Just say they don't readjust and there's a player drain to Japan, or et cetera, and the 4 South African teams aren't as competitive as we think they will be. And by nature of the way it's set up at the moment, one of those goes into the Champions Cup. That has ramifications then for whatever group they land in terms of someone having an easier game. Like, we don't give the English clubs special dispensation for the teams who are from Cornwall, or the French, if you're from Basque region, you need to get in. So I think it's okay to start off with, but I think the best driver of competition and performance is that accountability for your results and not having any freebies in. So I certainly I would like to hope that after 2 years it becomes top 8 and the best survive, the best go through, obviously the quarterfinals plus Champions Cup, and then it's about each team, financing, finding the right finance to be able to do that, developing their own players, recruiting properly, getting their coaching staff right, getting their culture right. And I think that will then drive the the URC itself, rather than any kind of leniency or trying to get the right geography. I think realistically, for me, the top 8 go through to Champions Cup, and that will actually help the performance on the field.
It's a complexity of a cross-border competition, but a fascinating one. And as you both outlined, loads to be excited about. It's a long way off, and we'll probably forget about it now for a while until September. But definitely more excitement about that than there would have been for a Pro 14. As long as we get a Tullow Tornado analysis show, I'll be happy enough. You up for it, Birch?
Yeah, well, let's sort it out, yeah. We just need someone to pay for it.
I'll start pitching now. It'll be a lot of fun. Listen, we have international rugby on the horizon now, Gary. It's going to be exciting now to see a very different Ireland squad in these 2 July tests against Japan and the US. 12 uncapped players, just in case people didn't see it. Robert Balakun, Tom O'Toole, Nick Timoney, Caelan Blade, Tom Daly, Paul Boyle, Harry Byrne, Peter Dooley, Ross Maloney are all in there, as well as the Munster duo of Gavin Coombs and Fineen Wycherley. James Hume also a late call-up due to Gary Ringrose's injury. What caught your eye about this squad, Gary? Because it's an interesting window without those Lions players you mentioned earlier on.
Yeah, a few things struck me. The one player I'm most excited about is Robert Balakun, because I just think he's an incredible athlete. He's an interesting story. He only took up the game at 15. As recently as 4 years ago, he was playing junior rugby with Enniskillen. But there was a try that was chalked out that he got against Leinster in March, Murray, and it was just for me, apart from Keith Earls' try against England, it was the most impressive thing I saw all season. I can't remember why it was chalked off. Something happened earlier in the move, but Balakun's speed, his instinct, the slash and sidestep, his eye for the try line, it was world class. It was breathtaking. It really was. So he's the player that stands out, and he's been really unlucky. Like he had a terrible hamstring injury last August, where his hamstring was torn off the bone. Basically, that was the injury that finished Paul O'Connell's career. So like that wiped out his opportunities. He went over a year without playing between lockdown and then that injury. And prior to that, he had scored 6 tries in 7 starts for Ulster. He's only 23. He's just got so much going for him. And he said himself how when he did a spell in the Irish Sevens program, how that sort of improved his capacity to deal with stress within matches in terms of his decision making and getting his fundamentals right and all the rest. And the other factor about this, Murray, is that if he does emerge and proves that he's capable of stepping up to this level, then all of a sudden you've got options in your back three of either Keenan, Zebo's coming back next season as well. So you've got Keenan, Zebo, you've got Earls, you could even put Will Allison in at fullback as well. You've got Larmour, you've got Stockdale and Balakun. And that's before we mentioned James Lowe, Andrew Conway or Shane Daly. So what we're seeing now throughout the Irish squad, and again, it goes back to the point I made earlier, that even though on the face of it, it doesn't look as if the starting lineup has changed greatly. In fact, it hasn't changed greatly. But the fact that there have been 11 debutants last year and you've got another 12 players coming through, you've got real depth now, Murray, that just didn't exist in the old days in Irish rugby. Like if you go back to the mid-noughties, the first name on the team sheet for Eddie O'Sullivan, it wasn't Brian O'Driscoll and it wasn't Paul O'Connell. It was John Hayes, because there's nobody else at tight head. Yeah. The second name on the team sheet was Peter Stringer, because there wasn't a credible alternative for a few years at scrum half. Whereas now, if you even go back to 2018, Murray, when we were in Australia for that tour, the deciding test, Sexton and Murray were the only two players, their replacements were the only two players that didn't get off the bench that day. In other words, there wasn't depth that the coach trusted in those two positions. If you look at scrum half now, you have the option of Murray, Casey, you've got Luke McGrath, you've got Marmion, you've got Cooney, you've now got Keelan Blade, who's been brought into this squad, and you've got Gibson Park. If you look at out half, you've got Carberry coming back into the squad. Carberry hasn't been capped since 2019. He made his debut at Soldier Field in 2016. He's an incredible talent, but he's only had 6 starts for Ireland. So you can't fail to be excited by the idea of him coming back into the picture. You can't fail to be excited by the idea of seeing if Harry Byrne is as good as he has looked at provincial level. And there are 3 names, but if you look beyond those names, you've got Ben Healy coming through, you've got Crowley coming through. So there's 5 options at out half, and we haven't even mentioned Billy Burns, Ross Byrne, or Ian Madigan yet. So there's 8 options that are credible at out half. And when you think back to when Humphreys retired and before Sexton came through, the options for Eddie O'Sullivan then at out half were either Ronan O'Gara or Rog. It was just non-existent. It was Ronan or Ronan, that was it. So basically what I'm saying is all through the squad, maybe a little bit light in terms of depth chart at Loosehead and in the second row, but everywhere else, there's just so many numbers for Farrell to look at, and like Tom Daly coming through adds even more depth to the midfield area, which already had plenty of depth, and he's had a tremendous season. He's had a better season than Bundy Aki has had. Yeah,
absolutely, fair point, and you're so right. And even with this extended squad, there's plenty of chat about guys who've even missed out and been unlucky. Scott Penny is one, Birch, and a couple of shouts on Twitter. We called for questions about Jean Klein, him missing out. There was another one from Mike Haley, but Jean Klein seems to be seen as a figure who's unlucky here. There was one message saying maybe there's an unfair bias against him based on the media reaction to the 2019 World Cup thing with Dev Toner. What's your sense of that? Is he unlucky, Birch?
Yeah, I don't really think he's unlucky, and that's not trying to, that's not valuing what he brings. I just think that, I think obviously James Ryan and for me Ryan Baird are ahead of him in terms of what what they've already done and what they can do, particularly for Baird. I think Ulster Delan has had a good season and has, probably more potential to be that explosive ball carrier than John Klein. I think John Klein is very good at what he does. And most of that's without the ball. So it's in terms of, his scrummage and his maul work, his physicality to break down his defence. The issue is with the ball, he has a good bit of improvement to make in terms of explosive carries, in terms of his ability to catch actually, could do with a little bit of work on. So I don't think there's a bias towards him for the World Cup. Maybe some people are carrying that in terms of their analysis of him, but I certainly think he does a very good job. He's a very good squad player for Munster. He's a very good addition for Munster. If he stepped up to play for Ireland, would he let us down? No. But I can see why he's not in this squad, and I think that Wycherley, who's a similar type profile to Jean Klein in terms of being that physical lock, has probably a little bit more upside in him, and I'm delighted to see him in there as part of the young cap players. I would probably look at. I totally agree with Gary that we have a massive depth at the moment. But I think that's the nature of, keeping a really tight rein on foreign players. So if you've got, 160 contracted players in Ireland and you've got a really tight rein on your non-Irish qualified, you should have decent depth, and particularly because we do give opportunities for so many players to play in our domestic competition. That's going to be there, and that's always going to be there. So we've moved on from 10 years ago when we only had a couple of options, but the question mark for me is can this squad produce 2 starters for Ireland or 2 match winners for Ireland at a World Cup or in a Six Nations or in a November international series against the All Blacks or South Africa. And for me, the ones I'm really excited about, absolutely, I think I agree that Balakun has that point of difference and could become a starter for Ireland and a match winner for Ireland. Coombs, is really exciting. And obviously with CJ retiring, there's a spot up for grabs. I think it's a mistake to not have Scott Penny in the squad. I think they could have given Peter Manny a rest as well. And I know, he had a suspension, etc. in the Six Nations, and maybe hasn't played as many minutes as some of the others, but I just think we know what he can do, and I think Scott Penny has that upside in a very competitive area. But I think in 3 years' time, Scott Penny could be an international, rugby player for Ireland, helping us win games. And there's some guys in the squad I don't see that. Them becoming that. And that's not an issue. I mean, every country's looking for those 6 or 7 players who on their day can help you beat the best in the world. And as I said, I think I put Coombs and Balakun in that bracket in terms of uncapped. I think Carberry obviously has the potential to replace Johnny and be that player that we build a team around. And I think Baird has that potential as well, even though obviously we already have James Ryan and Henderson as being kind of British and Irish line quality, but I think Baird has that potential to step up as well. And then Doris, we know, is going to be a phenomenally important player for Ireland. So yeah, I like the squad. I also think it kind of shows you that if you stay in Ireland, and I benefited from it in 2005 against Japan when there was a Lions tour on to get a cap. It does, if you stay in Ireland and you stay fit and you're playing for your province on a regular basis, maybe not in the Champions Cup games, an opportunity will come around to get capped, and that's a big part of helping us keep players in Ireland as well. And so I think that this is a real opportunity for a lot of those players to get capped. And obviously if they go really well and continue to progress, they can obviously get a lot more. But for me, Andy Farrell will be hoping to find 3 or 4 starters for Ireland who can help us win big games and have a point of difference.
Really interesting to see who takes their opportunity. There seems to be a lot of excitement about James Hume getting his belated call up. He's been excellent obviously for Ulster all season, matured with every opportunity he's had, and there's definitely a lot more potential there. But Gary, Bernard just mentioned the main man, Johnny Sexton. He's one of the guys who is rested, along with Healy and Earls, all of whom are going on to new IRFU contracts. We got a question from Brian Fiore, one of our members. He said, what's next for Sexton in an Irish shirt? And we talked about this around Leinster last week, Birch. But he says, Farrell has made a big call picking one burn over the other. Is this a sign he's starting to realise he needs to find his world-class 10 for the World Cup? And how can Sexton come back under a longer-term plan, Gary?
Well, look, he's not going to be around forever. I mean, once you get a certain number of candles on your birthday cake, then that pretty much hastens. You're coming close to the end, like, you know. But he's won cap. He's 99 caps for Ireland, isn't he, Murray?
He's close.
So I mean, like getting to the century is a big deal, and he should be afforded that opportunity, providing he's fit and providing he's playing really well. The reality is that in the Six Nations this year, he was Ireland's best out half, like, you know. And if you're the best, like, there's the tired old cliche that if you're old enough, you're good enough, but it goes the other way as well. It doesn't matter if you're 36, 37 or 38. If you're still the best player, you should be played. And I'm not a believer in building everything for 4 years' time for World Cups, because I don't think we have enough players to do that to start with. And secondly, a player can get injured. Like, for example, in 2015, everything could have been built towards around Paul O'Connell. Paul O'Connell's not available for the quarterfinal. Similarly, we could have built everything for the last World Cup around Joey Carberry, and then he gets injured against Italy in the run up to that tournament. So it's too combative a game. The number of injuries are just too high to be able to have a crystal ball and look forward. So once he's fit and once he's playing well, he deserves his place. But he's not going to be around forever. And I think Farrell has obviously recognised this, in that he's going to have another look at Carberry, and he's also brought Harry Byrne in. Like, Harry Byrne's only played 22 times for Leinster. A number of those games have been as a replacement. So, like, I mean, it's an obvious call to make because he's very, very talented. I wouldn't have minded seeing Ben Healy in there as well. Do you know something? I wouldn't even have minded seeing Jack Crowley in there. It's Japan and the USA. The results don't matter. Farrell, after beating England, has got credit in the bank that he could really, really experiment heavily in these games. And who cares if they lose? It's not a big deal if you lose these games. And you want to see as many new players being given the opportunity as possible. So I agree with Bernard. They should have given Peter O'Mahony a rest over the summer. He was right to give Earls, Sexton and Healy a rest. We know what they can do. We want to see what other people can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a key part of it, say, Bernard, getting a couple more players who are going to be part of that World Cup group. What about tactically? I asked Andy Farrell about this the other day. He kept talking about speed. That was his kind of key phrase around players, around his own tactics. What would you like to see in these two games from Ireland in terms of game plan and strategy?
Yeah, I do think we need to find a way of making up for a lack of power. And speed is certainly one way of that, of doing that. I mean, we're going to get a like for like test when we play Japan, because they're a team who have found a way to beat bigger and stronger opposition through speed. And you know, I doubt we can get to their level, in the course of a 3 or 4 week period. I mean, how they got to that level in the World Cup, Jamie Joseph built on what Eddie Jones had started in terms of fitness and skill levels, and he had a 4-year block to implement it. So if the 4 provinces aren't playing with a similar style to how Andy Farrell wants to play, it will be harder. It will be harder to control. But definitely, playing with speed, playing with evasion, getting the ball to the area, to the space, and is going to be the key. And Joey coming in, I mean, who he plays with Joey, I think is going to be really interesting. I think if you want to play with speed, your 9 choice is going to be massive. And no disrespect to Conor Murray, but that's not his super strength. You can see when Casey plays for Munster, Munster play at a different tempo. So, and that's probably something I haven't seen a huge amount of real clarity in terms of with under Andy Farrell is probably the alignment of selection to strategy. Sometimes it's been a little bit confusing. And again, look, this is a block of 2 games where experimentation is key, finding players is key, but it will be really interesting to see tactically if we can implement that speed, and if it makes us, perform better from an attacking point of view. Because I would say traditionally Irish teams, when they get into trouble, they go back to that set piece territory, to win the game. Whereas, as Gary said, the result is pretty much irrelevant. But it would be great to see the start of a tactical evolution that, Farrell and his coaches have come out of the Six Nations, have looked at what's happening worldwide, have looked at the player pool they have, and said, right, this is how we're going to go. And in November we'll add to it, in the next Six Nations we'll add to it, etc. Rather than be overly I think a lot of pressure came on in the last Six Nations, and that can affect your decisions around selection and strategy. But now you'd like to say, okay, they've got past that. They're going to be here for the long haul, and let's implement a strategy that can, get us as high as possible in the world rankings, and hopefully win some silverware.
The pressure was all coming from you, Birch.
That was me, sorry.
Go easy on Andy. Listen, really looking forward to those tests. It's going to be really interesting, and absolutely buzzing now for Saturday, because it's the start of the under 26 nations, which for me is some of the most entertaining rugby in the calendar. There's that bit of naivety, some decision making that would have professional coaches with their heads in their hands, but it's always exciting. Richie Murphy is in as head coach, Birch. And Alex Condellan's the skipper from Munster. You'll be working on these games with RTE. Who are you looking out for in particular, and what chances do Ireland have, do you reckon? Yeah,
look, it's a big turnover. Look at obviously with COVID and things like that. There's only 6 guys back who were involved last season. Sirocco, Corkery, McKee, Moxham, and Ford and Murphy. I'm really looking forward to seeing Doak at 9. Nathan Doak. I've heard a huge amount about him since he was 13 or 14. I know in Ulster there's massive raps on him, and I think he's someone that I haven't seen as much as I would have liked, and this tournament's going to be great to see him over those 5 games. Obviously he's competing with Richie's son, Ben Murphy, for that starting 9 spot. I saw a lot of Chris Cosgrave playing in school. He's a very exciting player. Jamie Osborne as well. Obviously, we've seen him play for Leinster. Moxham, I like, and Condellan is supposed to be a really good player. I haven't seen as much as I would like to him. So, look, at the great thing about this is, and this was brilliant when we were able to go to games, and particularly in Cork, there was a great atmosphere. The team, they became kind of characters in front of our eyes, and we've followed some of those through. Casey, for example, we followed through to the Irish jersey, which is a phenomenal rise. But there's players in this team that we know very little about now, and that's partly down to, obviously, they haven't played rugby for a year because of lockdown. So, over the next 5 weeks, we're going to see some stars emerge, and it's a very exciting opportunity for Richie, and for him to get a chance to go from being a skills coach to being a head coach. And I'm fascinated to see what philosophy he will look to implement. I saw the videos of their games against Munster and Munster A and Leinster A, and there was a lot of kicking in that. And as a kicking coach, maybe that's where he's going to go. But look at just because you kick the ball doesn't mean you can't have there's a different type of kick, and it'll be really interesting to see where this team plays in terms of attacking philosophy, and who steps up. But they're all live on RT actually, so hopefully they get a lot of viewers, and people can get a fix into late June.
Yeah, good audience would be great, and plenty of exciting rugby. As I say, loads of talent. Unfortunately, Ben has been ruled out with that ankle injury, I think, this week. And Will Riley, the Barnhall fella, has got in, but it's just another opportunity for another young talent who was unlucky to miss out. How important, Gary, has it been, this step, under 20s rugby, which you mainly view as a development tool?
Well, yeah, it's, when you look back to, say you go back 5 years, Murray, to that 2016 team, like James Ryan, Andrew Porter, Will Connors, and Shane Daly were all in that one. And they made pretty rapid progress. Hugo Keenan was also on that team, but people have almost forgotten about that. Like, he was, if the other guys were sort of emerging stars, he was the one with sort of late bloomer tagged onto his collar. But you look at him now, and he's undroppable for the Ireland team. So I mean, from this squad, you're sort of looking at Kindellan, and you're thinking everything you've heard about him in terms of his attitude as much as his ability. You're sort of thinking, right, this guy's got a great chance. And when they spoke, Murray, to the press last week, what really struck me about them was they were really confident guys, but there was also a nice humility about them as well. They'd got that balance spot on. And sometimes you speak to players, and or younger players in particular, and a real an arrogance is often evident there, and it's misplaced because they haven't done anything to justify it. But with the guys that we spoke to last week, Cosgrove and Kindellan and Ford, you certainly got the impression that their head was screwed on. They were realistic. They knew that if they're going to make it, they're going to have to work. And it's just fascinating to watch these guys, because for me, the result is completely irrelevant. But what I'd be looking for is what's going to happen 3 years down the line. Who's going to emerge? Who's going to be the next James Ryan? And I really can't wait to see Soroka. He made his Leinster debut earlier this year against Glasgow and just looks really, really talented. Tim Corkery featured against Zebra. And Kindellan, he also made his Munster debut this year as well. And you're just looking at these guys and you're going, like, they've got huge competition within their provinces to make a breakthrough, but they've also got huge potential and huge ability. And I can't wait to see the matches.
Definitely an exciting aspect of Irish rugby's future. And there's another Ireland team in action this weekend, a massive weekend for the Sevens. We got a question from the WhatsApp group, members WhatsApp group, on this. Actually, it's a good chance for me to remind people, if you want to get involved in the members WhatsApp group and the membership, we're running a scheme at the moment for Father's Day gift. Basically, if you're scrambling for a present for your old man, this is a nice idea. You can head over to members.the42.ie/gifts, and they get access to the best podcast newsletters, our WhatsApp groups, all that beautiful stuff. You can get a $5 off the price at the moment by using the unique offer code RugbyPod. So head over to members.the42.ie/gifts to get involved there. The question from the members group, Birch, is from Jack Power. He says, what are Ireland's chances of Olympic qualification? If the men's team miss out on Olympics, would it be considered a major failure for the RFU, or just a reflection of the competition being more mature and developed?
I think it'd be a failure. I think it has to be seen as a failure, given how we've prioritised it. This was one of the big, milestones that we were chasing. Obviously, the women's team have missed out on it. So yeah, I think it'd be a big failure. And just going back to a pet peeve of mine, the IQ program. I mean, there's only 2 players from the IQ program in the under-20s, so of 34. So, the whole idea that there's a lot of talent that's been found, and this is the place where they need to come in and prove themselves. But anyway, hopefully there's over the next couple of years there's going to be bigger numbers coming through from that, and they justify their place. The Sevens, I think it'd be a big blow. I mean, it seems from speaking to pundits who are very much on top of Sevens form, it should be between us and France from what they tell me for qualification. And look, it looks like we've got a strong squad. They've obviously been working incredibly hard, and hopefully we can win that spot. But yeah, I would say if we miss it, it's a black mark against this program, because that was something that a lot of players were focused on, and obviously it would have been a big achievement and a big honour for players and for Ireland to have a team at the Olympics in Sevens. So hopefully we can get the job done.
It is going to be really tough. As you say, French are definitely the favourites for this tournament in Monaco, and with way more established kind of series presence. Ireland have a group with Samoa and Tonga, who actually have Malachi Fekitoa flying in for the weekend to use that loophole to qualify for their 15s team as well. So even the group stage will be tricky. And as you know, 7 minutes at half, one bounce of the ball can decide your weekend and rule you out of the Olympics. On the flip side, it can decide it for you. The squad is strong. They got Harry McNulty back from the US, which is a key addition. He's been brilliant for the Sevens over the last few years. They've got unbelievable players like Jordan Conroy and loads of talent across the group. So we'll watch with interest. But Gary, like, it hasn't really grabbed the consciousness of Irish rugby yet, has it? David Nucifora imagined this being a big strand to things, and if they don't get the Olympics qualification, they'll again struggle to really grab attention.
If Nucifora goes, Murray, I can see the Sevens program being not being the priority of Nucifora's successor. It just doesn't have tradition in this country. There isn't a lot of love for it. The love is for the 15s, and I just can't see that ever changing. I really can't, one way it could change if they did get to the Olympics and they did really well. The Olympics is the biggest show on earth, so that could alter things. But if they don't, then there is a lack of love felt by a number of clubs in this country. And that's where they feel the focus should be rather than on Sevens. And that's a reality, and we can't pretend that isn't a reality. And that's where people want the attention and the finance going towards rather than to the Sevens program. And, unless they have success, I can't see that changing.
Yeah, I think the Olympics would be massive, as you say, like everyone sitting at home watching it. It is very entertaining when you get involved, and I've definitely enjoyed it. There have been players who've flagged it as a bit of a development tool. Maybe that's overstated at times, as we've discussed, Birch, because talented players are going to come through no matter what. So it does feel like it's on a bit of a knife edge there. So fascinating to see what happens this weekend. And obviously best of luck to them in Monaco. I want to finish with one kind of random one, Birch, from the members WhatsApp group. Completely off topic here, but Kieran asks, Kazuki Himeno is playing this weekend in the Trans-Tasman final for the Highlanders, the Japan back row. He's been a great signing and totally agrees, one of my favourite players actually. He says, why has he been such a success on the pitch and a fan favourite relative to other foreign imports into Kiwi and other Southern Hem teams?
Look at it. It's because what he does on the field and by all accounts off the field as well. He's a lovable sort of fella. I spoke to Gio Aplon, who played with him in Japan in Toyota Verblitz, about him, and he just said he's just such a humble, kind of honest player who has an unbelievable skill set. And look at there's a huge tradition or appetite in Japan to get a lot of Tongan kids into Japan very young, so they go to high school over there on scholarships, etc. And it's a big opportunity for some Tongan families to give their kids a different education or an opportunity to make a really good career for themselves in rugby or in business. And he's someone who went through that pathway, played for Japan in the World Cup, and the Highlanders have a very strong link with Japan, as most Kiwi. There's a huge connection between New Zealand and Japan in terms of players, but also coaches going doing spot clinics, etc. But the Highlanders, obviously, with Tony Brown and Jamie Joseph, have had that, and there's been exchange of players in the past. And he's the latest to come in, and he's just been phenomenal. And he'd be a nice replacement for Nakawara in Ulster, wouldn't he? He'd add something to the URC. But an exciting player who it's amazing. Like, it's brilliant to see players from Japan going into Super Rugby and being so successful, and obviously we have the winger in Claremont, whose name is Matsushima, who's come from Japan World Cup to the top 14 Champions Cup and being so exciting. So I think it's a brilliant initiative, and the fact I love the way New Zealand are open to that. I mean, even given Jack Regan an opportunity, Conan O'Donnell to play there. James Haskell had a shot with the Highlanders as well. So they have unbelievable talent, but they're not close to opening up the odd foreign player spot. And anyone who gets to benefit from that and playing in Super Rugby in New Zealand is very fortunate.
Be good to see Himeno over here, and Nakamura, he's my favourite in that team as well. Great playmaking 12. But Gary, just to wrap, the second part of the question actually from Kieran is, who do you think of the current crop of Irish national or provincial players would excel in Super Rugby? Who's your shout?
I'd imagine they all would do pretty well there, Murray. I can't think any that wouldn't.
Yeah.
I'd love to see a fit Dan Levy, given the opportunity there. I think if he was fit again, he could excel anywhere, and he would be the player that would sort of stand out. Doris as well, Tagburn. Those would be my three.
Yeah, who'd enjoy it most, Bert? Who do you think would embrace it? Celebrations, dances?
I think Craig Casey would love it. he'd be at the forwards' heels for the whole game. It's high tempo, quick taps. Yeah, I think Casey would. I'm not sure about his celebrations, but the great thing about him is he expresses himself on the field. He's just himself and brings a little ball of energy. So I think he could go quite well in it.
That'll be very, very fun to see. Limerick's finest down in Super Rugby. Anyway, listen, lads, that's all we have time for today. Birch and Gary, thanks a million for your insight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for tuning in and for all the great questions. Sorry we didn't get to every single one of them. We're back on Monday. That's the 42 Rugby Weekly Extra Pod. As I said, you can sign up at members.the42.ie if you want to get involved. And that code was RugbyPod, all one word. Otherwise, we're back next Thursday, so we'll chat to you then. Cheers.